Ministers have hinted the government could be pressing ahead with new pledges on housing and inheritance tax as Rishi Sunak struggles to narrow the popularity gap with Labour.
It comes after the Treasury announced the 2024 budget will be delivered by Chancellor Jeremy Hunt on March the 6th, which is no big surprise, especially if a general election is to be held in May, as some predict will happen. Joining us now is talkTV's political correspondent, Alicia Fitzgerald. Alicia, are you surprised by the timing of this budget?
Well, I feel like everyone was really reading into it. Everyone was being, it's slightly earlier than normal, so does this hint about when the election will be? Last year, well, this year, should I say, 2023, it was on the 15th of March, so not massive difference there. It's about a week or so difference, and I feel like we can't read into that too much about whether or not that means there will be a May election. But nonetheless, this will very likely be the last time the government have the chance to unveil big new economic policies, plans for growing the economy, or not, potentially. We'll have to wait and see about that. But that will be their big chance to really try and win over the electorate and say that they are a safe pair of hands with the economy.
Well, you say big plans, but with these tweaks, spending and taxing, isn't it normally big headlines, but then nothing really massive changes for the electorate?
This is always the concern with these big announcements, especially now we're really close to the election. Labour always argue that they will just get really big headline-grabbing policies that actually they probably won't be able to implement if the polls are reflected in the general election results. They look like they're probably not going to win. Obviously, we don't know for sure. But if that is the case, then all of these big announcements, they actually won't really have time to really be implemented and make big change. So they will just be getting those things that the electorate hear, those buzzwords, and think, hang on, that's what I want.
I just want to come back to what you were saying at the beginning, Alyssa, because you were saying we can't necessarily read too much into it. But if the budget had been in mid-March, as you said it was last time, that wouldn't have left enough time for an early May election, as in you have to have 6 or so weeks, at least probably 8 weeks to get an election underway for everybody, to close down Parliament and to go out and do all the leafleting and electioneering. So in some ways it does look like a bit of a wink and a nudge.
It could be, as in maybe it's ruled out the first part of May, but it hasn't ruled out the whole spring period at all.
Yeah.
Most people are debating whether or not it's going to be in the spring or the autumn, and this date doesn't necessarily completely rule out it being in the spring whatsoever. It just doesn't necessarily mean it probably isn't going to be the 1st or 2nd of May like we thought.
But I suppose that comes down to the idea that if the Conservative Party is going to have an absolute drubbing at the local elections, which are in that first week of May, would you really want to do that? Sort of dust yourself down, sort of almost like, wipe your wounds from that injury and then go into another election. Most people seem to think if you're going to do that, you'd have them both on the same day.
Well, this is it. There's such a big debate about what Rishi Sunak is actually going to decide here. He's got these local elections. The Conservatives aren't predicted to do super well in those. The last time these seats were up for grabs was in 2021. The Conservatives did really, really well, mainly crediting to the vaccine rollout, the COVID vaccine rollout. They got a lot of praise for that in that period of time. But this time it's not set to be quite as big of a victory. So there is a bit of debate there. Will Rishi Sunak hold out, maybe hope that they do a bit better than they predicted in the local elections and therefore that gets carried through in public opinion? Or do they take the risk and potentially face a bit of a battering?
And I'm going to criticise the government here. No surprise there. 2 fiscal events a year, autumn statement and then the budget. Is it not better to just forget doing the autumn statement and just concentrate fully on one big fiscal event a year, so we can have some proper big bang effects rather than we're going to lower taxes here, now we're going to increase it in August again? What's the point?
And maybe some more long-term thinking rather than
Yes.
tinkering, working out how it's going to work for the next few weeks and then have another tinkering.
Yeah.
I think it's all a bit about saving face in terms of these big political decisions. If you have a shorter space of time before you can rectify a mistake that you potentially made last time, it's obviously a lot easier for the government and it's a lot easier for whoever's in power. You have a bit more of a smaller window to scrutinise your own work, mark your own homework if you want to call it that, and you have time to make a change. And the government will argue that actually they can say, we made these decisions, we listened to the public maybe didn't like X, Y, Z, and therefore, as a result, a bit later on in the year, we're making the review that you all want.
Alyssa, talk to me about these self-driving cars. Obviously, this has been mooted for quite a while. Lots of people find the idea really quite
terrifying,
quite scary.
Yeah.
And yet the government now saying this could be an answer to road safety concerns, as in they're saying it could make roads more safe and easier for disabled people to travel.
Yeah, this is definitely one of their more out there policies out of all of the ones that we've heard. And it's something that Rishi Sunak has spoken about a lot. You know, he really is into tech, he's into new technology, he's into advancing tech. So it's not a big surprise there. The only issue with this is lots of big companies who manufacture these cars are saying there is no way it will actually be completed in that short time frame. They're saying we just simply don't have all the safety concerns put to bed. We don't have the technology enough to support this. So there is a bit of question about whether or not that target is realistic, but it is something that the government have spoken about for ages and said that they really think it will increase productivity. It will make labour obviously a bit cheaper if you don't have to pay someone to drive vehicles and cars. So there's a lot of debate about it, but whether it's realistic or not.
Put a lot of drivers out of work though.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Now we know Sunak is a bit of a nerd when it comes to tech, so he's obviously
Yeah.
going to be a big fan of this. But these pledges, tax cuts, spending, is this going to make any difference when it comes to the polls, really?
Well, one of the biggest issues for the Conservatives at the moment, and has been for the past few years, is that people have lost trust. They haven't lost trust. Well, they have, maybe. Lost trust in them with the economy. They were always seen as the financially responsible party over Labour. And now lots of people are saying that just isn't the case anymore. They feel more comfortable elsewhere with the economy and with their finances. So this will be a big sticking point for the Conservatives, and it actually could do something to actually slightly boost their opinion polls. Maybe not enough to totally change the game, but it probably will do something to make people feel like they'll be a bit better off under the party.
Well, it was fascinating in the Times yesterday that new YouGov polls, which looked at specific, not just do you prefer Conservatives to Labour, but looked at specific policy areas, immigration, crime, economy. And Labour Party was ahead on all of those really traditional Conservative strongholds, the areas that traditionally people have thought, no, the Conservatives are a safer pair of hands. With those areas, Labour ahead.
Definitely.
That would be very frightening for Conservative central headquarters.
Definitely. And if you contrast that to 2019, that was when it was Boris Johnson versus Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, the polls could not be more different. Obviously, the Labour Party was seen as so fiscally and financially irresponsible. Loads of people just said that Labour were just making unfunded pledges and had no idea where exactly all of this money would come from, and the idea that they would borrow a lot was also there. But actually, borrowing is now the highest it's ever been, and that is under a Conservative government. So,
Well, Emily Thornberry from Labour will be joining us later on the show, so we'll put forward some of your questions to her. Thank you, Alicia. Thanks for joining us so much.